Welcome to Samvad after a smallish break, which was due to certain personal reasons. But now we are back, and today we are hosting Sri Amb Sibal, former Foreign Secretary, to discuss what else President Donald Trump and his ways, I would say. Welcome to Samvad, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
So, although I'm not a very big follower of the New York Times, but there was something very pertinent written about the American foreign policy under Donald Trump after the Maduro kidnap, as Professor Jeffrey Sachs and the rest of the intelligent world is saying, and thuggery also. So, what New York Times wrote, I'm quoting those words. Quote, rather than the moralistic imperialism of George Bush, Trump's foreign policy is imperialistic gangsterism. The danger to the rest of us isn't a military quagmire, or at least in the short term, but an emboldened president who has learned that audacious thuggery works. American foreign policy will shed its last vestige of restraint and become fully and nakedly predatory. Quote closed. Your views, sir?
Well, Trump had given an interview to New York Times recently where he was asked what can restrain him. Can international law restrain him? He said, no, I don't believe in international law. So then the next question was, then what is it that can restrain you? He says, my own morality and my own mind. Now, his morality, as you know, is extremely flexible, and his mind is very changeable. So he wants to manage the world on the basis of his morality and his mind. It's a disaster. It's a disaster. After all, he's the president of the most powerful country in the world. Now, in this context, let me say something, which is that I don't think there's any president in the history of the United States who has been so powerful in inverted commas. Within 1 year of his assuming presidency, he's changed the entire domestic landscape in the United States, and he's changed the international landscape. Doesn't mean that he's changed it for the better. And when I say the most powerful person, it doesn't necessarily mean that the power has been used positively. It is that he feels he's all powerful, that he can dictate his wishes, his preferences, his prejudices to the rest of the world. In fact, order the world according to his worldview, which is not simply make America great again within the frontiers of its own country, but make America great again in terms of being what you just quoted, imperialistic. Now, if you look back a little bit, the national security strategy that was published in 2025 by the United States actually revives US imperialism. It actually revives the Monroe doctrine, which was rooted in US imperialism. It has absolutely no meaning today. Today, if the world was to be based on what was agreed in 1945, which is a UN Charter, to put behind the whole era of imperialism and colonialism and everything else, treat all countries as equal, and have a consensus-based view of international governance that take into account the preferences, wishes, and of every country, not interfere in their internal affairs, respect their sovereignty and territorial integrity. That is the blueprint. Obviously, this has not been followed, but nevertheless, the UN Charter has exercised some restraint on the powerful countries, that they have had to justify their actions before the international community, a degree of sensitivity to how it may look to the rest of the world, and to what extent this can actually lastingly damage the foreign policy of these countries who act arbitrarily on the global stage, though they have been doing so. But in the case of Trump, he's making no bones about it. I mean, he's gone ahead and kidnapped Maduro, the head of state of an independent sovereign country. Heads of state have sovereign immunity under the Vienna Convention. The domestic law of any country, powerful or otherwise, cannot be extended to other countries. But they got some sort of a court order that he was involved in narco terrorism, and on that basis of the mandate they got from a district judge or whoever it was, they went and abducted a foreign head of state. And then he's gone beyond that. You must have seen his clip, which was there this morning, where he's put a portrait of himself, and underneath that, the acting president of Venezuela. So, and then he made no bones about the fact that Venezuelan oil is American oil, because America, 100 years ago, whenever, developed the infrastructure for exploitation of this oil, which was nationalized by Venezuela. But he says it's our oil. And then he says that this oil will be owned and marketed by the United States. And the money that is earned from that will be handled by Trump himself. And that portion that will be allocated to Venezuela will be used for buying only American products. And then he says that, and then the rationale is, which Rubio has also expressed, that the Western Hemisphere is where they are, where they live, and therefore external power should not be there, neither Russia nor China. Now, if this argument were to be accepted, then the Russians could legitimately say, and they've been saying, that what are you doing next to our borders? Why are you expanding NATO? Why are you there in Poland and the Baltic states and everything else?
Even China can say that, sir. Even China
can say that what are you doing in the Western Pacific? Why do you have military bases there? This is not your region, you are far away. This is our region, they can say, legitimately, because they're the biggest country in that area. In fact, barring Russia, China is amongst the biggest countries in the world. At least in Asia, is the second biggest country in the world geographically. So they can say, well, what are you doing in our Asian continent? So, but they are not bothered about any rational counter to what they are saying. It's sheer power, exercise of power, and the belief that they can get away with this, as has happened, because America has never been punished or sanctioned by any external power, even when they've committed terrible mistakes, because others are not in a position to do so. While they, in turn, impose punishment and sanctions and attack physically other countries. Now, Trump, for example, for the first time, has physically attacked Iran also. There's no mandate. There was no mandate from anybody to attack Iran. And of course, Trump's view of how Gaza should be developed, kind of a Riviera, all under his auspices, etc., etc. So what you just quoted about thuggery, one regrets to say so, is quite opposite.
Sir, he's been speaking of Monroe Doctrine, the national security strategy of the United States, spoke of a corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. But if you go, I was just going through the Monroe Doctrine, it is more of defensive nature. 1823, times were different. America was newly born. The European colonialism was at its peak. They might have been encroaching into the Western Hemisphere, so as to say, for imperialistic reason. But now he has turned everything on its head and indulging in daylight robbery. So is it more of, because he's now interfering in the Western Hemisphere, which was not the case with Monroe Doctrine. It was more defensive. So it is daylight robbery, I would say. You are seeking land. It is more about land, resources. So is it only about America or is it about protecting American interests? Because if that was the case, then the Chinese hold huge amount of agricultural land in the United States. He was so scared of the Chinese because they are the only superpower who can take on the Americans, so as to say. So what exactly is this method behind this madness?
Well, I'm not too sure what you said about the Monroe Doctrine not uh, being a defensive doctrine. No, how after all, where did the Americans come from themselves? They came from Europe,
Yes, sir, they did.
so they were outsiders, and they colonized the United States,
But they
and they
had
killed the.
already done that, sir. They had already done that and
Right.
they had
But
built a
they,
new country.
uh, yeah, but they have built a new country, yes, but as outsiders, as immigrants,
True.
as people who had emanated from a geography which was also the geography which produced colonial power. And if the Pilgrim Fathers and whoever followed could build up the United States, Spain could also build up their own colonies in Latin America, as they did, and so did Portugal. Uh, Number one. Number two, if you look at the distances between United States and Latin America, it's huge. It's
Hmm.
huge. And today, of course, America is very powerful, but they didn't have the means actually to be able to combat the colonial powers in Latin America, thousands of miles away. They didn't even have a strong navy.
Hmm, 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 hmm,
So therefore, number three, look at the expansion of the United States.
hmm,
After all, they took huge chunks of territory from Mexico,
hmm,
California, New Mexico, and Texas, and all. They all belong uh, to uh, to Spain. So I don't think it was defensive. In fact,
yeah.
the creation of America as it stands today is also a result of territorial expansion and imperialism in that sense. It's a different matter that those they were snatching land away from were not the original owners of the land in any case. So they were also
Hmm,
former colonial powers. Louisiana, they bought it from France. So you can raise the question, what, um, but why was France there? Uh, so no, the the thought behind that was that the colonial powers of Europe should be kept away, which were not kept away, as I just said, because they conquered the whole of Latin America. That is one. The other is that this revival of the Monroe Doctrine in this time and age, when, for example, China is the biggest economic partner
hmm,
of virtually every Latin American country. It has its trade with Latin America, if I forget the figure, is about $550 billion. Um, Many of the projects there are part of their BRI and this and that. Now, these are sovereign countries. Why don't they have the right? I'm not betting at all for China, but purely speaking, intellectually and objectively, uh, these sovereign countries who have development needs, who want to develop their infrastructure, who want to trade with the rest of the world, they should be able to do so as a result of their sovereign choice. Why is it that they have to defer to the United States of America and accept the doctrine that the Western Hemisphere is the preserve of the United States of America? I mean, this is totally unacceptable in today's time and age. But this is what it is. And the Trump corollary is that United States can, as has happened, uh, invade a Latin American country and counter the influence of Russia
hmm,
and China. And this is what they're saying. And he's terribly loose on facts. He
hmm,
says Russian and Chinese. ships are all over that area. It's not ships meaning military
Hmm.
thing. That's not true. That's not true at all. Yes, these Venezuela has strong ties with both China and Russia.
Hmm.
Uh, there was military support also. Now, in addition to whatever Trump has said, not in addition, he has said so himself, Cuba is very much uh, in their eyesight uh, because Venezuela has been supplying oil to Cuba on a discounted basis, cheap oil, as against which Cuba has been providing security uh, to uh, to Chavez and now to Maduro. And in fact, Cuba has mourned officially the loss of 32 Cubans who were protecting Maduro and who
So
were killed by.
as sir, as sovereign nations, they can do that very well. I mean,
Of course, they
why should
can.
America interfere? So what is this method behind this madness? What exactly are the goals?
It's very difficult to understand. It's just okay. I mean, if one were to try and make sense out of it, because you can't always make a method out of madness. Madness is madness. But since the madness appears so much madness that you say that, look, it can't be. Let's think of what could be the rational behind
Mhm.
something which looks absolutely wrong and mad. So if one to, think along those lines, then a few things can be said. One is that America and Trump, they're beginning to sense that they are losing their hegemony. Uh, and that China has now become uh, a major competitor.
Hmm.
In fact, in the uh, National Security Strategy Review, or whatever it's called, um, they have, for the first time, described China as a peer country, as a peer power.
Hmm.
So they've accepted that they've reached the same level.
Hmm.
They have seen how their historic position in Latin America has been gravely eroded by the great advances, economic, and with that comes political influence too, that China has made. Then they see the biggest country in Latin America, Brazil, uh, is becoming economically closer to United States. In fact, when China stopped buying soybean from the United States in order to have a handle on them, who stepped? Brazil. So Brazil has become the biggest soybean
Hmm.
supplier, exporter to China, which hurts the American farmers and it hurts Trump's base. And then Lula has been saying openly that within BRICS that we should move toward de-dollarization and
Hmm.
countries should trade in their national currencies, which he's already doing with China. This trade is in their national currencies, and he's in favor of a BRICS currency.
Hmm.
So uh, So Trump sees what is happening on the horizon and how much it can damage U.S. Excess of U.S. power globally, uh, and therefore he is targeting China through this so-called Monroe doctrine and
Hmm.
whatever else. Now, insofar as oil is concerned, uh, Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves in the world. Now, if he gets hold of Venezuelan oil, coupled with the fact that the United States itself has reserves and is the biggest producer of oil today, it'll it will have control over about 30% of global oil,
Hmm.
which means that it will have a grip on the oil trade and oil politics, which hitherto has been largely controlled by OPEC and what have you. Uh, and China is hugely import dependent insofar as oil is concerned. They were getting about 6 point some percent, 7% of their oil from Venezuela, and about 23% from Iran. And now they're targeting Iran. So there is also that kind of method in that madness. The other is pressure on Russia. Russia was strongly present, is very strongly present in Cuba, and was also present in Venezuela. Uh, Now, this is also a way to uh, counter uh, Russian power in the Latin American continent. And the and his claim over Greenland, and he's saying it quite openly. And again, wrongly, he says Chinese and Russian ships are all over the place. Actually, it's not the case at all, because the Arctic is still icebound. So there are no ships flying anywhere. Uh, but in future, if the northern route, Arctic route opens up, then there would be Russian and Chinese ships, certainly.
But do you see,
So,
sir, the NATO taking him on in Greenland because Greenland is part of
no,
NATO itself? So it's a very
no,
paradoxical situation.
I'm just coming to that. Now, he thinks that if he acquires Greenland, he'll be actually countering the reality of Russian domination of the Arctic route. Because I forget the figure, but 80% of the littoral of the Arctic is Russia. So they will dominate. And then they have all these icebreakers and everything else.
Mhm.
And the Chinese will come in. It shortens their route, trade with Latin America and this and that, and with the United States and with Canada. So this is again a riposte directed at Russia.
Hmm.
Uh, so insofar as what you said about uh, his plans to forcibly acquire Greenland if necessary, it doesn't make sense
Hmm.
because Denmark and Greenland are already part of NATO,
Hmm.
and United States already has military bases there. What the Danish Prime Minister has been saying, which is rational,
Hmm.
that if you want more bases, let's talk, we'll give you. If you want mining rights, let's talk, we'll give you.
Hmm.
But why do you want to
Hmm.
actually uh, forcibly acquire Greenland when you can meet your objectives through negotiation? Now, his answer to that, he was asked that question. He says, if you own something, then you can spend a lot of money. But if you lease something, it's not the same thing. So, I mean, it's a ridiculous argument.
Hmm.
So, and then, of course, there is a strategic thing behind this. Although I'm not an expert in this, but at least this is how they explain
Hmm.
that the missiles and all the armory, powerful armory, submarines, and all that Russia has in the Murmansk region,
Hmm.
uh, if they were to be launched, missiles and the submarines were to be activated, Greenland stands in the way. So in case of missiles, it will be the earliest early warning system where they can see the. I read somewhere that the easiest to shoot down ICBM a missile when it is at its apogee, and if something is launched from Russia, its apogee will be over Greenland. But this they can do without having to own Greenland. So it's just the other explanation is that he wants to distract attention from the mess he's creating internally. And the one way to uh, distract attention, keep the focus on himself, be dominant in the news cycle, change the news cycle every second day,
Hmm.
is to do these things, irrational things. So the attention is always on him. He's an egomaniac. He's a narcissist.
Hmm.
A narcissist. And he says all kinds of things which are not backed by any kind of facts. Look at the Nobel thing.
Hmm.
Uh, he removed Maduro, uh, and earlier on Machado was the obvious replacement, and then suddenly she's not
Hmm.
because Trump said, "I don't think she's popular enough and she can
Hmm.
handle the situation." Some people say the real reason is not this. The real reason is that she got the Nobel Peace Prize, and he's terribly miffed. And this lady has understood is
This offering the
giving
Nobel Prize.
offering the Nobel Peace Prize to him, and it became serious enough for the Nobel Peace Prize committee to say no, Nobel Peace Prize cannot be transferred. But when asked that she wants to hand over the Nobel Peace Prize to you, would you accept it? He says, "I'll be honored to receive it."
Hmm.
So I don't know. I hope I put some method in his madness, but the
So
man,
he's decided to go and become the acting president of Venezuela himself. So,
yeah.
talking of irrationality, sir, his approach towards India, it's getting worse by the day. I mean, we need not repeat the insults which have been coming out of the United States because that is not the purpose. But the Indian response. Now, there are many critics of the government who say that the response has been very mute and India should have been vocal. And the opposition, obviously, they have a right to launch themselves into this. And then there are people who say that the approach has been mature and it is best to wait and let the storm pass. How do you see the Indian response, sir? What is your opinion about the Indian response to this diatribe which comes out on a daily basis?
Well, a couple of things. One, that this diatribe, as you say, or the insults that he hurls at India are much milder than those that he hurls at others. I heard him the other day talking of Macron, and I
Mm,
commented on that. It was a great fall of the prestige of France,
mm,
where he said that he told Macron that you raise your pharmaceutical prices, you
mm,
double them,
mm,
because Europe's exports huge number of massive amount of pharmaceuticals to United States.
mm,
And he said, Emmanuel told me, no, 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 you can't ask me to do that. I can't do that. And I told him, Emmanuel, you've got to do it. Otherwise,
mm.
I'm going to put tariffs on your wines and on your champagne. Emmanuel, you have to do it. And he did it. So, I mean, this is so humiliating. He's not gone that far.
Sir,
But
and
only
he went ahead, sir.
mildly,
I'll just interrupt
my,
you. He went ahead and said that Macron said, don't tell my population.
yeah. Yes,
Sir, please carry on.
that makes it worse. He went a little bit in that direction when egged by this absolutely unspeakable warmonger called Lindsey Graham, when he
Mm,
talked about uh, this new legislation, Russia Sanctions Act, to impose 500% tariffs on anybody who trades with buys oil from Russia. He said, "Well, I like Modi, but Modi knew I was unhappy, so he tried to make me happy."
mm, mm,
He said, "Sir, may I see you?" Now, this is very patronizing on his part. You
mm,
don't talk like that. And then he goes on to say, "Well, it's very easy to raise tariffs on India." So casually, as if it has no consequences. He can play around with this, with a major country like India, speak
mm,
loosely about this, totally unmindful of what the problem he'll create on the ground, and the impact of all this on bilateral ties. He's done that, but it's much milder. The way he's blasting Europe and the European Union, he's
mm,
openly saying that the European Union should not exist.
mm,
And he supported Britain walking out of the European Union. He supported Brexit. He trashes NATO. And the manner in which, yes, the manner in which he treated the European leaders when they came to see him at the White House.
mm,
I've had officers meeting when I was in position, and they were all sitting around me, and the same setup where he's sitting on on
mm,
his table in the White House, and all the European leaders are around him, uh, like his subordinates. So, therefore, to answer your question, yes, he has been needlessly insulting. Some of his aides have been very insulting. It's a dead economy. India is a dead economy. And now what Lutnick said, as if, uh, signing the trade deal is like buying a railway ticket, that if you don't buy it on time or if you're late
mm,
to reach the platform and the train moves on, and that's the end of the story.
mm,
Complete nonsense. But this is what he said.
mm,
So, um, my mind, we have said what we wanted to say. Now, on uh, his claim, which he has repeated 60 times now, that he brokered the ceasefire between India and Pakistan and threatened both with trade sanctions, saying, we'll stop trading with you, that kind of a thing. We have in Parliament stated this is not true. We
mm.
have formally stated it's not true. Now, should we repeat it 60 times? What's the point?
Yes,
What's
sir.
the point? In fact, as I understand authoritatively, that when Prime Minister spoke to him from Canada, where he was attending the G7 meeting, and Trump had left earlier, and Trump asked him to come to Washington, and Munir was there. Prime Minister, I believe, spent about 15, 20 minutes explaining to him how the ceasefire happened. Now, Prime Minister explains to him personally, we say it in Parliament, Foreign Ministry says it. Now, what more? I don't think we should get into that kind of a game. Now, insofar as all these unpalatable remarks he makes, now you can do that in order to, you know, to, in a sense, show that you will not take it beyond a certain point. Then what will be his reaction? You're not dealing with a normal person.
True.
It is, he's not lifted those 50% tariffs on us. He can do something else. Supposing he starts putting tariffs on your services, he'll have a huge. See, there are a lot of things he can do to harm us. And since he's unstable, why provoke him? But again, when it comes to fundamentals, we have not yielded.
True.
2, 3 things. We invited Putin, not only invited Putin, demonstrated to the world how much we respected him, how much we valued our relationship with Russia, gave him royal treatment, the works. Knowing how we are not fools, knowing how it will be viewed by the West. Number 2, Prime Minister has more than once publicly said that come what may, I'm going to protect the interests of my farmers and my dairy workers and my fishermen, which means that we are not going to yield on the fundamentals when it comes to our trade negotiations with the United States, where they want us to open our dairy sector and our agricultural sector and for us to buy GMO crops and stuff like that. We seem to have made concessions which we could make, and it has been recognized even by Lutnick, by Besant, no, by the USTR in his testimony to the Congress. He says that India has gone very far in making offers, which was never the case earlier. Something like that, he said. He appreciated that India had done a lot, but we preserved our basic interests. That again is enough. Why do we get into this tutu mama kind of a thing with them on trade negotiations? I think, to my mind, the Prime Minister has been very wise in not unnecessarily challenging the man, countering him, making him feel small, humiliating him because of all the mistakes he committed, because his reactions would be irrational. Will be irrational, as is the case in his reactions with other countries.
He's already talking of the Iranian tariff, the 500% tariff and stuff. So I believe, sir, we can only wait and watch and let the irrationality pass by us. Maybe that is the best we can do. While the world waits with bated breath as to Mexico, Cuba, who's going to be next, Colombia. On that note, sir, we can only conclude because, and it's been, I can only thank you for sparing time for us, sir. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I'll
Thank
come
you very
back to
much.
you, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
the best. Bye-bye.